Everybody, it's Brent Axe, syracuse.com, Syracuse Orange Basketball Facebook page. Again, we're going round two here. Had a little bit of a technical issue as we were doing a live chat before. So if you were part of that chat, thanks. If you've come back to this chat, thank you again. So let's just get right back into round two here, presented by our friends at Krause Health. Syracuse losing to Iowa tonight, 68-54, the final score at the Carrier Dome, and that means Syracuse falls to 4-4 on the season. That's the worst 8-game start under Jim Boeheim. It's the first time Syracuse has been 4-4 at this point after 8 games since the 1971 season. And if you want to go back a little further, the worst 8-game start Syracuse has had, since, 68-69 when they started 3-5. So one way or the other, not good for the Orange at all, as a lifeless, flat-footed, frankly boring offense got run by Iowa. And this is a one-point game at halftime. This is a 30-29 game at halftime, and Syracuse just doesn't seem to have that next gear that the teams that they have played the last 3 games do. The difference in this game, Oklahoma State, and Penn State, just not competitive games. I mean, just games where Syracuse got outran, out-physicaled, certainly out-rebounded by Penn State. 57-25, I believe, was the final tally there. Syracuse rebounded in this game, only dropping to Iowa in that department 37-36. They scored inside. Marek Dolzaj and Barama Sidibe were actually active at times. Marek was taking shots from the foul line. Did get into a little bit of foul trouble, not as much as he has in recent games. Barama had 8 points and 8 rebounds, so you can't put it all at their feet. It's just this team can't score. This team is just lifeless and flat-footed on offense at this point. Iowa got it going in the second half. Bohannon, their three-point ace, started shooting threes, and Syracuse started giving up open shots. And you just have a team that now has 3 non-conference losses in its back pocket, and it is December 3rd. They lost 4 non-conference games last year, made a 10-8 run in the ACC, so they recovered from that. As we sit here today, what makes you think that this team can recover from the slow start that they had with the younger players in the lineup, with the struggles that they had? They have no point guard. We mentioned that Marek and Barama were better, but they just have no inside presence. They don't have a strong interior scorer. They thought that Quincy Guerrier could provide that, and maybe he still can, but at this point, he's a freshman finding his way. Joe Girard is just not a facilitator at the point guard position. He's an offensive-minded player. He's trying to find his way at point guard. That's not a position that is easy to learn on the job. And you're counting on him to be more of an aggressive scorer and an aggressive shooter for this team. Well, he and Buddy Boeheim in their last 3 games have combined to shoot 15 of 65. That's not good, certainly. There's going to be nights where Elijah Hughes struggles, and this was one of those nights. He went 3 of 13. Iowa played good defense on him at times. And there's just going to be nights he doesn't have it. There's going to be nights he cannot just point at his back and say, climb aboard, kids. And tonight was one of those nights. This is just a team that it's one thing if you watch a team and they're fighters and you can see where they're going and you can get behind them and you can say, I see a path. This is just a team where the only path they're going to have is perhaps the first losing season under Jim Boeheim if they can't improve, if they can't find a way to come together. There's just no chemistry on this team. And I understand they're young. I understand you've got some freshmen in the lineup. But, look, that's college basketball. You got to play young guys these days. And I know these are not the young guys that Duke and Kentucky and some of the top-tier programs get in college basketball these days. But, it's just a lot of excuses at this point. This team should be better than this. I think that's not an unfair expectation. But even so, it's just not a team that you can, you're fans and you support the team. And I'm not saying you can't get behind in a way. I don't mean to put it that way because you support your team, right? But this team is hard to watch. This team is just flat out hard to watch at this point, and you wonder how it can improve and get to the point that they need to. I mean, forget getting to ACC play in January. They got another ACC game this week. Their next game is an ACC game. And if they lose to Georgia Tech and Atlanta, they're already in an 0-2 ACC hole, having lost to Virginia in the first game of the season. We all know that the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee looks at all 4 months of your schedule. Non-conference play is more important than ever. All these games that Syracuse has lost are all going to be quad 1 or 2 losses for Syracuse, all top 75 KenPom rated teams by any measure. And not only are they losing these games, they're losing them big. every game Syracuse has been involved in this year has been decided by 14 or more points, which is kind of amazing to think about, that all 8 games have gone that way. So they're either cruising and beating teams like Bucknell or Colgate or Cornell by that score, or they're losing big. And like I said, though, this game was a lot closer than either Penn State or Oklahoma State. I think Syracuse got within 5 or 6 points at one point to Penn State, but, I mean, you just could tell from the get-go that Penn State had their foot on Syracuse's throat, particularly in the rebounding department. But this team just can't score. It's just a lifeless offensive team. So how they improve on that, how something lights a spark, what Jim Boeheim does to tinker with the lineup to get some offense going here is going to be fascinating to watch, because right now they have nothing. So let's get back in the comments here. Appreciate those of you that came back to this chat, because our first attempt tonight fell a little flat. We had a technical issue there, but I think we got it all squared away. So let's jump right back in and see what you guys are saying. Jeff, noting that a long, sad season is underway. 15 wins could be the cap. I see Gene Waldron in the chat, a former Syracuse player, saying no energy on this team. Should be noted, Derek Coleman, simple tweet tonight, said this is not Syracuse basketball. So former players looking at this and certainly getting frustrating as well. Paul saying it's not hyperbole, but the way this team looks right now, they won't even qualify for the NIT. I believe you still need 15 wins for that invite. With the bulk of the ACC schedule coming, name the next 11 wins. That will bring the Cuse up to 15. It's kind of hard to imagine at this point, right? KA says can't put a square peg in a round hole. This is not the personnel for the zone. Matt saying there's no playmakers. Antonio saying no point guard, no center. Quincy needs time and needs to give Braswell some run. Completely agree with that. I think Jim's just out of excuses at this point. And he sees practice, we don't. I understand that, but you got to try something. And Braswell's a guy I think can handle more minutes. You don't have to play him 30 minutes, but he can shoot the three. He can rebound. He does have his struggles. Every young player is going to struggle on defense. Why Jim favors some players in that department and others get just, should I say it, the short leash, is amazing to me. Now, Bryson Goodine's getting time. He's a freshman. He's hesitating at times, but he's just got to work through it, right? And that's the thing. What if you put in Braswell? Jesse Edwards is raw. He's a project. He's a 6'11" player. I think he's actually 7 feet. But again, you're not playing these guys 20, 25 minutes. I think the usual reasoning of sticking with a 7-8 man rotation is going to go out the window here, because the guys that are in there don't look like, for the most part, they can handle it. And I think Braswell's, right at the top of that list. I agree with that comment. Antonio says they were essentially tied at halftime, then a 20-point blowout in the second half. More calls for Braswell to not only play, but to start. Dan saying, do you think it's recruiting? We look like the less talented team in these games. Could it be the Hopkins effect? These aren't his recruits anymore. Maybe players were coming here because of him. Do you think he'll come back when Boeheim leaves or is asked to leave? A lot of questions in there, Dan. I don't think there's any question recruiting is part of it. Syracuse has been in the mix for some big players as of late. Isaiah Stewart, they were in the mix for. Andre Jackson, they were in the mix for. You want to go back a couple of years, Quade Green, they were in the mix for. And recruiting is recruiting. You're going to miss on some big targets. But when you're in the big three for a lot of these big players, and they're all going elsewhere, I mean, it's close but no cigar. The NCAA sanctions caught up to them. Players leaving early caught to them. Certainly players they didn't expect to leave when they did. O'Shea Brissett left a lot earlier than people thought. But you got to account for that. You've got to balance that in. You've got to, if you're going to be in the game for talented players, you're only going to have them for 1 or 2 years, right? And Boeheim said it at the press conference last week. He said it again tonight that, when you have so many young players on the team, it just makes it that much harder. But that's college basketball these days, right? These aren't the young players that Duke or Kentucky or, a top-flight program has, a Cole Anthony-type player at North Carolina, but this is what you got. And they just don't look like that they can run with these power conference teams at this point. Let's see. David saying, Mr. Axe, appreciate the Mr. Tell the truth instead of double talk. This team is bad. I don't know what I've said to indicate otherwise. This team is bad. This is not a good basketball team. And if you don't want to take my word for it. Now, I had the TV on mute, not intentionally, just one of those things. Seth Greenberg was doing the studio for ESPN tonight. I didn't listen to him tonight, but the other night, and Fran Fraschilla the other night when Syracuse played Penn State, flat out said this is the least talented team that they've seen at Syracuse, and just flat out said it's not a good team. Not a good team that night, not a good team at all. There's Anthony, my man. At least the Bills are good. That's right. Go Bills, baby. Beat those Ravens this week. Claude says they have no players that can create a shot, which I don't care how good of a shooter you are. If you can't create, you're nothing. Their defense is mediocre, zero inside presence, zero in maybe 2 or 3 years before they're a factor on the college basketball scene. Again, somebody asked me an interesting question on Twitter, like, what's the one thing this team needs? And we just went over that list that you gave it there. I think they need a facilitator. Like, not having an inside scoring presence, they've gotten away with that in recent years. And, you can go down the list of what this team needs. They don't have a leader. They don't have a facilitator. They don't have somebody that's creating, that's pressing, that's creating energy. Somebody brought it up earlier. Do you miss Tyus Battle? In no shape or form at this point. Like, at least Tyus Battle. And he was a veteran player that was there for a few years. Okay, this comes with experience and it comes with time, right? But Girard has that mentality. To see the way Joe Girard is struggling right now, missing easy looks that in practice he hits 100 out of 100 times. Just a fluid, ahead of his game shooter who played a ton of high school basketball, state champion, as we know, several times over at Glens Falls, all-time leading scorer in New York State history. But this is big boy basketball, right? And teams are wearing him out. They're going at him. He's playing more minutes than he did in high school, and he's just making that adjustment. He has that mentality, though. But when you're a young player and you're missing shots, your confidence just drains. And this is a guy that's got a ton of confidence. And he and Buddy Boeheim have combined to go 15 of 65 in the last 3 games. Like, shooters got to shoot, and they got to keep it going. But, the Syracuse is such a one-dimensional team that if they're not even at – I don't even know what the number to put it is. But let's pull it up here, okay, while we're yakking about it. So Girard tonight goes 2 of 8. Buddy goes 2 of 10. So they're combining to go 4 of 18 for the 3rd game in a row. And you got to account – somebody brought it up a moment ago about not being able to create your own shot. It's absolutely right. But Joe, I've seen, can create his own shot. But they're just getting worn down. But they're missing the good shots. I mean, it's one thing when you can't create your own shot. They're missing easy shots that they should make, 7 days out of the week, which is just befuddling to me. But that's a confidence thing. When you're missing easy looks that you've made 100 times in your sleep and make you're not even thinking about it, that's confidence. And this team is just drained of all confidence, of all spirit. There's no energy on the floor. It's a mess. It's a bad team right now. There's no question about it. Barry thinks that Girard's in over his head. I think he is, but it's going to be trial by fire. He's going to play. Howard Washington didn't get in the later part of the game, put in for Girard. Maybe if Joe keeps struggling like this, you got to go the other way. That Howard Washington Jr., who, look, is not as good of a player as Joe and Buddy are. Howard is, I love the spirit. I love the story. Came back from the stroke situation last year, but he's just slower. He is just, I like how he fights, and I could be wrong about this, but it might get to the point where Howard's got to play point, start the game, be the facilitator, and Joe is the energy cap off the bench. Right, like Dion Waiters, for example, never started a game at Syracuse. He played a lot of minutes. He played starters minutes, but was just that punch off the bench that you needed. Maybe Joe is better off in that spot, and Howard's just better off just, being somebody's running the point. Don't ask him to score. Don't ask him to create. Don't ask him offensively. Don't ask him to do the things you're asking Joe to do. Just run the offense. Just find the open man and go in there and facilitate. Rob saying, I'd love to see Washington and Hughes at guard, Doljai, Sidibe, and Guerrier as a primary lineup. If each is able to play consistently good and not occasionally great, to steal a football phrase, right, in those spots, especially on defense, that lineup is a longer and more athletic lineup and could be solid in the zone. Work in Boeheim, Girard, and Goodine. Accordingly, with Boeheim and Girard still getting decent minutes, sadly, the scenario might be a reality sooner rather than later with such a young and at times deficient team. Rob, I think it's a great comment as always from you. Let's give that a like. There we go. Boom. I'm trying to like it. There it is. I think we're going to see Hughes at the 2. I do. If Buddy keeps struggling like this, I think you're going to see Hughes slide to the 2. He certainly can play that position. I like your lineup there. So you got Washington and Hughes at guard, Barama, Sidibe, and Guerrier. I like that lineup. Doljai, Sidibe, and Guerrier, I should say. I like that lineup, and I think that's the lineup they're going to have to go to with Goodine and Joe and some of those other players you mentioned coming off the bench because they're just not handling starters' minutes at this point. KA says Washington and Hughes up top, Braswell, Marek, Guerrier, another possibility there. Antonio saying Coach Boeheim just needs more time to rebuild this team. He's only had, checks his watch, 45 years, right? That just keep piling it on, right? But it's amazing because Syracuse has the longest streak in the country without a losing season, 49 years. That actually goes beyond Boeheim, as he's been here for 44 years at this point. Foul Breeze asked an interesting question. What happens when Carey's healthy? I don't think we're going to see Carey on the court this year. I think he's going to have a medical red shirt. So that's what's going to happen there. Carey not getting a fair go. Well, he's hurt now. So when 8 to 10 weeks is the diagnosis for his surgical thumb, and he's still got the big wrap on his hand, as you can see him on the bench. But I don't think he's going to play this year. I think he's going to get a medical red shirt, which is better for him. It gives him choices in case he wants to leave Syracuse, or it leaves some options on the table for him there. Poor Gerard. He never knew how fast and big these Division I guards are. Great attitude, big heart, but overmatched. He's got a lot of the things you can't teach. It's the things that you can that he's really struggling through right now. Mike asking if we can trade for Melo. Yeah, the Western Conference Player of the Week, Carmelo Anthony, back with the Portland Trailblazers. I mean, he only played a year. There's some loophole in his declaring for the NBA, perhaps we can look into at this point. Desperate times call for desperate measures, right? Richard saying he thinks this team is going to be below 500 this year. It's really sad to watch them play. And I brought up some of those stats earlier, and stats aren't everything, but in the second half of this game, let me pull up the second half stats. Okay, let's look at this. First half, 30-29 at halftime. Iowa shoots 11 for 32, that's 34%. Syracuse 10 of 27, that's 37%. Now let's look at the second half. Iowa 15 of 29, 52%. Syracuse, flatline. 9 of 25, 36%. The Orange were 2 of 9 from three-point range in the second half. Iowa was 6 of 16, but it was those 6 that they hit because they were not hitting for the most part in the first half. I take that back, actually. They were 5 of 18, 6 of 16, so they were a little more consistent from three-point range. It was one player in particular, I'm thinking of Bohannon, who didn't really shoot that well in the first half, but really shot well in the second half of this game. There was a 5-point burst that he had early in the second half where you could kind of see Iowa really starting to take over this game. But that's it. Like, that's been a common theme in these games. Syracuse will hang in there. Maybe they'll be close at halftime. Even in that Penn State game, they got to within 5-6 points, but they fade in the second half. And this team, I mean, yeah, I know the teams they're playing in Italy, and they're not exactly superior competition, but this team did have extra time. Because with that trip to Italy a couple months ago came, I think, 15 extra practices. Maybe it's 10, but it was a lot. It was a lot of practice time you don't usually get in August. So when Boeheim says it's going to take time for this thing to come together, and I understand those games you played are nowhere near the games you're playing now. That's obvious to state, but they did have extra time, for what it's worth, to note that. Let's say Brian says, I'm just kind of catching up with you guys here in the comments. Fowl says, Brent, when are we getting those centers? Recruiting is horrible. They need that. They need an impact big man. Now, they were close on Isaiah Stewart, didn't get him. They were close on a couple other big guys that they didn't get. Andre Jackson would have been a huge guy. He's not a big man, but would have been a huge get in recruiting. Like, Syracuse needs like that wow recruit at this point, and I think that Woody Newton coming in next year is a good player. And Ben, if you are in the chat, my man Ben from syracuse.com, I'm forgetting who's the other recruit that got coming in 2020. His name's right on the tip of my tongue. But they're not big men. They're not the impact, athletic. Look at Penn State the other night, a guy like Mike Watkins. Syracuse needs a player like that. Barama, Marek, John Bulajak is redshirting this year. He's a project, but he's another one of those long, kind of skinny guys. Syracuse just needs that bruiser in the middle. They just haven't had that in the past few years. So for those saying that they need a player like that in recruiting, you're absolutely right. You're 100% on that. But that's in the future. This team right now, how do they deal? How do they get around their weaknesses? How do they find any kind of scoring? They have no consistent scoring other than Hughes. They have no inside presence. Their defense is behind. And again, I know you can relate a lot of that to inexperience, but I mean, Kadari Richmond, thank you. Appreciate you guys and a few other people, Ben and Anthony, thank you guys for reminding me of Kadari Richmond, but he's not a big man. So, yeah, they need that. But so how do you get around that now is the question. Well, the theory was you've got three really good shooters, and Elijah Hughes, Buddy Boeheim, Joe Girard, other guys that can hit shots at time. But tonight was a perfect example. Buddy, Joe, and Elijah all struggled to shoot the ball. You got nothing. I mean, that's just it. It's a great Tom Petty song. You want it all or nothing. Williams saying hire Bernie Fine. Yeah, a lot of people have been saying that. Look, that Bernie Fine was like some big man whisperer thing is such a misnomer. It really was. Like, Fab Mello came along after Bernie. Rakeem Christmas, remember, was a great player that got better as he went here. I don't think it's a problem in that sense. Like, people have brought up like a Derek Coleman or somebody like that coming back to coach the big men. I mean, I wouldn't hate that idea. Don't get me wrong, but let's not like go back to Bernie Fine being some sort of like basketball whisperer. Like, I mean, the guy never even played college basketball. I mean, he's a good coach in a lot of ways, but I think hindsight being 2020 is a bit overrated in that department. I like this comment from David. My 72-73 Tangerine team had more talent. Go Tangerines. Let's see. A couple more here, and then we'll exit stage left for the evening. Brian saying that all the assistants or guards need a big man to coach the bigs. I mean, if you know basketball, you know basketball, but that's not one I push back on too strongly because there's a relatability factor there. If you're a big man and if you have somebody who can coach that, I think of like a Danny Manning or some Patrick Ewing, certainly at Georgetown, like there's just certain things they can relay, they can teach. It's relatability that a guard can't. So I don't hate that idea. And that's nothing against, the coaches on this team that handle the positions that they do, because I think Alan Griffin knows the game, but there is something about a big man knowing a big man. All right, I'll tell you what. Why don't we end it there for the evening, ladies and gentlemen? Appreciate you coming back to part 2 of this chat if you were part of the first one. We'll be back on Saturday, so our schedule is we'll be doing chats the next 2 games for basketball. Georgia Tech, it's a noon game on Saturday. We'll be live right here on Facebook afterwards. If you miss it, just check it out on YouTube. And then we'll be around. Syracuse will take a week off after that, and we'll be here doing the live chat after the Georgetown game as well. After that, just so you guys know, for our loyal chatters here, I'll be taking some time off for the holidays and some of the games that we won't be doing chats for. Georgetown may be our last chat of the calendar year, and then we'll pick it back up in ACC play, but I'll keep you updated on that in our next chat, but we'll certainly be here the next 2 games. Please check out my recap on syracuse.com and all of our great coverage from Mike Waters and Donna DeToda and the crew up at the Dome tonight reporting on this game. Thanks to my guy Ben Burrows behind the scenes, making it all happen. Read Ben's stuff as well on syracuse.com. Just a great stats you need to know post about Syracuse hoops, all kinds of great stuff about Syracuse basketball. Ben's been kicking butt, been added to our sports team and writing about the Orange a lot more recently, so please check out his stuff as well. And you guys enjoy the rest of your week, and we will meet again here Saturday afternoon after Syracuse takes on Georgia Tech, an ACC game in early December. Kind of weird, but that's just how the schedule goes. Thanks for coming by tonight. Thanks to our friends at Krause Health as well.